Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Mythicast. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Mikaela Downs.
Hello, everyone.
And we are joined once again by the Pallet Town hero himself, James Harris.
Good, and you?
I'm good. James, welcome back. I think you're the second or third returning guest on Mythicast.
Well, that's awesome. It feels good to be back. I really enjoyed the first go at it. So
yeah, and I know that you've been grinding this deck because you've been tweeting at people about it. So I'm really glad to have you on to get to talk about blue-green Emry today. But before we get too far into this, and before we talk all about James and his epic climb this last month, I want to quickly mention our sponsors over at puremtgo.com. They are great. If you're looking for awesome Magic content, they're one of the best places to find that for up-and-coming Magic content creators, as well as their sponsor over at MTGO Traders. And it's so funny because I see a lot of people canceling. I think I said this last week, but I saw a bunch of people canceling their Mana Trader subscriptions and just actually diving back into owning MTGO cards. And if you're looking to buy MTGO cards, there literally is not a better way to do it. So check them out. Make sure that they know that the CCMTG Network sent you. And let's talk really quickly about the Discord. Because James, are you gonna battle in our Discord tournament that's coming up?
I'm actually not part of the Patreon anymore.
There's no Patreon. It's just a free Discord tournament.
Is it really? Okay, well, this is really informative for me. I love playing tournament Magic, and if there's a free tournament, you can sign me up.
Okay, so James, all you got to do is go join the Discord. Link in the show notes. Free, $250 cash and prizes. Just the MTG Melee event is up, and you can go shark our event, man.
Hey Siri, remind me to join the Discord channel.
I love it. Well, we know that he's an Apple user now, Mikaela.
Can we uninvite him?
Well,
you guys can tell me how fun Arena is on your phones before I ever get to try it. So
yeah,
I'm on a Google Pixel 1, so I don't even know if I can play it on my phone.
I just switched to the Pixel 5 for Christmas, and I love it. And I've been an iPhone user forever, so we'll see how it goes. I have a feeling my phone will get a little too hot. I don't want it to blow up, so I don't know if we're going to install Arena on it, but we'll try. James, really quickly, for those who might not have heard your first episode, I just want to kind of talk to you today about kind of who you are and just remind people really quickly, if we could, when did you start playing Magic?
I started playing Magic at the Return to Ravnica block back in 2012. Played through Gatecrash, really loved it. Found out that I was way too poor to play it. And it was a really hard game. So fighting games were a one-time investment. You just buy the game, buy a controller. And so that's where I went to for my competitive outlet after that. Took a long break until Guilds of Ravnica came out. Completely coincidental. I was just thinking about getting back into Magic, decided that I was going to go for it, and then found out what was coming out. So I've been playing very regularly since Guilds came out.
Isn't that what said that you came back to Magic too, Mikaela?
Just about. I came back right after it came out, like a few months after. So basically,
that's
It's
funny.
a great set. It was a ton of fun.
So, I know that we've asked you this question before, but can you talk to the listeners, in your Mythic grind and in kind of the time that you've spent the last, what is that? Is that 5 years? Don't tell me that's 5 years. How long is that?
No, it's like working on 3.
Okay, I was feeling old. In those last 3 years, what's kind of like one of the bigger lessons that you've learned?
I've really learned that the hive mind is a lot more powerful than the individual. So you might have some ideas and things that you want to do, but really when you get together with a group of people that are like-minded and are striving towards the same goals as you, that's where you're going to see the most growth in yourself. So whether that's Magic, whether that's like your professional life, whether that's relationships, just surrounding yourself with people that have that like mind and can help you along the way and that you can also help along the way is really, really powerful.
I think that's great advice. I know that kind of that's something that I learned in Magic as well. And when I started playing Smash, like the first thing I did is go find better players to me, ask them questions, learn from those who have already put in the work or who are putting in the work at the same level of effort that you are.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's how it was for me in Street Fighter. I had a senpai that I would just go to his house and he was really, really good and we'd play 40, 50 games in a row and I would just lose all of them. But even like I said, in relationships, like I'm engaged right now. So we just did premarital counseling with a married couple that we really trust and look up to and admire, and just got to like do some personality tests, compatibility tests, and like see where that all lined up. And we feel like we're setting ourselves up better for marriage now.
That's
so
cool.
hive
Awesome.
mind.
Let's talk about the journey. Let's talk about the, outside of your journey in your relationship. Let's talk about your journey to Mythic this time.
Okay.
I want to talk. What rank did you get with this Emry deck?
So I'm currently sitting in the top 1200 in Mythic, and I've been bouncing back and forth between like 3, 4, 500 to like falling out because I haven't been able to play over the last few days. But I'm pretty confident that I'm going to make that top 1200 Mythic cut at the end of the month and qualify for an MCQ.
How often do you find yourself in that echelon of those top 1200s to qualify?
I've never been in that top 1200. This will be my first time.
Congrats, man! I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.
What do you think did it this time?
So one, I hit Mythic a lot earlier this time. So last month when I hit Mythic, I hit it really late with like a week to go. And so I would win matches and see my rank go down. Because one, this is a pretty complicated deck and I was still like figuring out how to like play it efficiently. And two, Goblins was just rampant. So I'm sure that like people were winning 2 games for every 1 game that I was winning.
Sure.
And the closer you get to the end of the month, the more people are in Mythic. So the odds are really stacked against you if you hit Mythic late. So I hit Mythic early this time. I had a better understanding of the deck. I've been asking a lot of questions to a few people I know that are piloting it. And so hit Mythic early and have had a pretty good win rate in Mythic. So that's where I'm at.
What do you think your biggest takeaway from this specific journey was?
Biggest takeaway from this journey was I've never played like a graveyard deck or a Karn deck where you have a wish sideboard. Other than the Temur Clover decks, but like those are kind of, they're not that comparable, I don't think. So learning how to use a graveyard efficiently, learning what cards you need to wish for in what situations and how they can be used. That's all really complicated stuff. And so that's kind of where I've grown the most as a player since using this deck. It's been huge.
So what deck is this that you're playing?
I'm playing the Simic Paradox Engine with Emry, Kinnan, Karn, Tamio. Yeah.
And what made you pick the deck?
So I was really tired of playing the Sultai Mirror. I felt like I had a good understanding of that deck, but I played in one of the SCG Opens and I lost to the Mirror like 2 or 3 times in that tournament to lose. I actually lost back-to-backs for like my win and ins for day 2. And that felt really bad. So I was like, let's try something different. Let's try something that looks busted. And this deck seemed really fun. So I went for it.
I can definitely understand that feeling of being sick of mirror matches. So.
Yeah,
the Sultai Mirror is so hard.
You kind of answered our next question. So you mentioned Sultai. I wanted to ask, and this might be later in the show, so I might be pulling the trigger too early on this. But did you mention Temur just now? You did, right?
No, I didn't mention Temur.
Okay, so what? Kind of to add on to Mikaela's question, why blue green over Temur?
the mana's more consistent, and the teamer lists weren't playing very many copies of like the Aether Spellbomb. They weren't playing a lot of copies of Chromatic Sphere. I looked at their builds, and there's a very like few Tamios in them, and so I just felt like with where the like meta was at, that I wanted access to those cards. I wanted to be able to bounce Skirk Prospectors a couple of times to slow goblins down. I wanted Tamio to stop Thought Seizes from like stripping cards out of my hand. So I probably could have played Teamer and just adjusted a few cards, but the consistency of this was just like too good to give up. I never found a reason to try to play Teamer.
Were there other decks that you tried during this Mythic run?
I tried Gruul. I tried Sultai. I got pretty close with Sultai, but like just couldn't get there. Goblins was smashing me. I was losing the mirror probably 50% of the time, or maybe even like more than that. So I was just stuck in Diamond. And the Gruul build that I had just wasn't a very good build. We were talking before the cast, and Gruul is really, really good right now. I think if I would have found that list, like I would have been happy playing Gruul, but I never did. So,
Mikaela, you're a big Gruul fan, aren't you?
I've been playing it in Standard. I haven't been playing
right,
Historic recently.
That's right.
Hey, it's really good in Standard too.
It's the best deck in Standard, so it's I gotta understand, because I've been playing this deck. This is actually the only deck I've played on ladder this month, other than I think like a couple games with Mono Red to practice for Constructed Clash with Matt. And I've just been playing your list. Talk to me about No Escape the Wilds. Like, I know you said the mana, but like the card is nutso.
Okay, it is. That's a really, really good card. But like, at what point in the curve are you going to have room to play an Escape to the Wilds? You know, what is Escape to the Wilds doing for you, other than drawing random cards off the top of your deck that your Karn's not going to like just get?
So that's absolutely true, but like you can only play 4 Karns.
You can, in 3 Tamios.
Right, and I understand that the Tamios are kind of filling that slot. So is it just that you wanted a boat and some Tamios, and so there was no reason to play Escape?
Yeah, I think that's probably it. Like the fact that you get Tamio, you get the graveyard recursion from her, even through something that's like graveyard hate, like a Grafdigger's Cage, you know, it's pretty cool. And then I've been like really trying to concentrate on turboing out one of the Planeswalkers and only keeping opening hands that have the potential to do that and mulliganing aggressively for it. And that's kind of where I found my success. So
sure,
I haven't felt the need to draw randoms off the top of the deck whenever I'm hitting a turn 2 or turn 3 4-mana Planeswalker.
Let's pull up the deck really quick for those viewing on YouTube, and I will read it off for those listening at home, just because we're kind of getting into specifics now, and I'd like the listeners to be able to follow along. So we do have a Giganta as our companion, and then we have 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Kinnan, 4 Emry, 3 Uro, 4 Karn, 3 Tamio, 4 Mox Amber, 2 Aether Spellbomb, 4 Chromatic Sphere, 4 Mindstone, 2 Paradox Engine, 1 Sky Sovereign, 1 Blast Zone, 4 Botanical Sanctum, 4 Breeding Pool, 6 Forests, 1 Hinterland Harbor, and 5 Islands. I'm just going to pop off the sideboard really quick, just while we're here. 1 Aether Spellbomb, 1 Aether Gust, 1 Negate, 1 Spyglass, 1 Tail's End, 1 Wilt, 1 Portal of Sanctuary, 1 Strider Harness, 1 Aetherflux Reservoir, 1 Gilded Lotus, 1 Paradox Engine, 1 more Sky Sovereign, 1 Godpharaoh's Gift, and 1 Meteor Golem. So, I'm looking at the show notes here, and I was gonna say, how do you win? And what are the key cards? But the first key card you have is combo. But there's like 11 combos in this deck.
Okay, that's true. There are. The like easiest way to win with the deck is to get an Emry with some artifacts in your graveyard or on the board in Paradox Engine. that is like what you're going for all the time. So like when we talk about key cards, it's kind of hard to talk about one of those cards without the other. Although Emry can recur the engine out of the yard if you end up milling over it, if it gets countered. So we could just say Emry is the key card, but
so
Emery's not
Emry
doing...
Paradox Engine are like key card 1. You actually want both of those in play.
Yeah.
And then next up you have Karn, which is really just Paradox Engine plus, other thing like Strider Harness sometimes. Talk to me about that.
Well, Karn is a lot more than just the engine. Sometimes you'll play Karn and you'll just go get an Aether Spellbomb to bounce a problematic creature. Something like the Ooze, Scavenging Ooze, like taking cards out of your graveyard. At the end of their turn, you might bounce it so that you can get some graveyard recursion going on. You might go get a boat to go start dealing damage. You might go... Boat is Sky Sovereign for the listeners. Sorry about that. You need Meteor Golem to kill Planeswalkers, to kill random enchantments, anything like that. Karn is like your utility card where you have to use his ability very well in every matchup, and you have to understand what his best uses are going to be for where you're at early game, mid game, late game.
Awesome. You actually already mentioned the key card 3, which is the boat. For those at home, because I know that like a lot of Magic players are poker players, we're not talking about a full house. We're not talking about Karns over Llanowar Elves here. We're talking about Sky Sovereign. So the mana is interesting, and I know that we kind of already mentioned that you were playing 2-color for consistency, but are you really excited for the flip land for this deck?
Actually, yeah, I am very excited for the flip land for this deck. I think that it's going to just shore up a lot of things. We'll probably be able to cut that. I'm sorry, this list doesn't have Hinterland Harbor in the mana base. I'm playing a Hinterland Harbor now over the Blast Zone. So that is something.
The list has one Hinterland Harbor and one Blast Zone that you shared with
me. Okay, great. Yeah, we'll be able to cut Hinterland Harbor, because sometimes you get those awkward hands with 2 Botanical Sanctums and a Hinterland Harbor, and you're like, well, this really messes up my curve. Sure. So having, the flip land is going to be really good. It's going to increase the consistency a lot.
Do you? So talk to me about the Blast Zone. Is the Blast Zone kind of important here?
I was using it a lot whenever Goblins was more popular, especially because a lot of times they would just try to flood the board and come at you with a wide board post sideboard games. So I thought that it was important at first, but now that the meta's changed a little bit, deck lists have gotten tuned, we've gone through a Rivals MPL weekend, I've actually cut the Blast Zone. Just for more colored sources.
That's so funny. I have killed probably well over 15 Grafdigger's Cages with Blast Zone.
See, for Grafdigger's Cage, I've usually just gotten a boat and then I've plussed my Karn to make that artifact a 1/1. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that. Wait, hold on. I haven't done that.
Yeah.
That's way smarter than everything that I've done.
You can also plus your Karn to make it into a creature and just bounce it with an Aether Spellbomb.
All right. Well, that's why James is the expert on this deck and not me.
You did say you had a lot of questions.
I do.
So there are very cool interactions in this deck.
I don't know about Mikaela, but I am not a combo player that plays very intricate combo decks that you have to, especially I play toolbox decks, but this deck has. I mean, today I comboed with drawing infinite cards. I comboed with infinite mana. I comboed with. I had a game where I was pretty sure I was comboing off, but didn't know how I was going to win the game, and my opponent conceded. I think out of frustration. I don't. So.
I won an F&M once with Dragonstorm.
Is that the extent of your combo love?
Well, so on the topic of these interactions, what are some of the coolest interactions that you've had come up with the deck?
Okay, so cool interactions. really, like we just talked about, one of the coolest ones is you can plus Karn on your opponent's artifacts to make them creatures, and then you can do degenerate things like attack with a Sky Sovereign, deal it 3 damage, and then it's gone. Playing Uro while you have the boat out and hitting that full control button to either make mana for Mox Amber if you have no other legendaries, or crew your Sky Sovereign. That's huge. What else? You can use Aether Spellbomb, and this took me a while to figure out. You can leave up a blue mana and use Aether Spellbomb to bounce your own creatures. And so if your opponent plays a Bone Crusher Giant to try to get rid of your Emry or your Kinnan, you can just bounce it back to your hand, and then you still get to play your card, and their Bone Crusher Giant is gone forever. So
I had an opponent concede to that today. They specifically were Bone Crusher Gianting my Emry, and I bounced it to my hand, and then they conceded when I played it, and there was an Uro in my yard.
Yeah.
It was gas.
It's gas. Your Meteor Golem comes down, destroys something, and then you can crew your Sky Sovereign with it because it has 3 power.
Yeah.
So like there are like cool interactions that you don't see when you look at the deck list, but when you have the deck, you know, quote unquote, in your hands, even though we're playing online, you can kind of find these like cool case corner things to do.
So you didn't mention one that I wanted to talk about before we moved on, and that's actually Portal of Sanctuary. Can you talk to us about that card and kind of the cool interactions with it?
Okay, so I didn't understand this card either, and I asked Matt Kling about it on Twitter, and he said that you can go infinite if you have enough mana dorks through Graveyard Hate with something like Ancestral Statue, which isn't in this sideboard list, because you can do it with Uro as well. I've recently updated my list to play the Ancestral Statue to make it easier on myself. So just so listeners know, I've cut Gilded Lotus because I was never going to like go get that card, and I played the Ancestral Statue.
Fun fact, I was literally, the next question in our show notes is talking about why no Ancestral Statue, and I was literally going to suggest that you cut Gilded Lotus because I never grabbed it. So,
yeah, I've never once. Yeah. Never, not once.
I did think about it once today, but I was like, that's so win more. Like, I mean, who needs 3,000 mana when you?
Yeah, who needs 3,000 mana? Yeah. You really don't.
Can you talk to me, because you know you're psychic and you also have access to our show notes and you answer my questions early. Let's talk about the sideboard and the kind of sideboard plans. Okay. And kind of before we go into like aggro or control or the combo decks or the mirror and stuff like that, when you have a toolbox sideboard like this one, you know, how do you decide how many cards you need in your sideboard that are like actual sideboard cards? Because here you have a Wilt, a Tail's End, a Negate, an Ether Gust, and is that all of the cards that you would feasibly board in?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just 4 cards and then 11 Karn targets.
So do you ever board any of the Karn targets?
No, never.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll board out some of my artifacts to make them Karn targets to make room for an actual sideboard card.
Yeah, so I have been finding myself boarding out a Mox Amber.
I've been doing that a lot recently too.
So talk to the listener about that.
Okay, so Mox Amber is pretty good if you have like an early Elf and Kinnan, because then you get, 4 mana on turn 2. You can play one of those Planeswalkers, which is really cool. But playing a Planeswalker on turn 3 is fine. So if you side out 1 Mox Amber, you're going to limit your chances of doing that a bit, but it also gives you a Karn target, which sometimes you want to be able to go get a free spell. It's not that often, but when you play this kind of deck, there are a lot of corner case scenarios that don't happen often. And so sometimes you'll want access to that free spell, like I said. In a matchup that's going to be a little bit more grindy, I side it out every time because I know like this Planeswalker coming down on turn 3 as opposed to turn 2 isn't going to make that big of a difference. So we can slow our deck down to be able to handle something like a Nissa or an Uro or something like that coming down, and maybe we'll have this Aether Gust instead.
Okay, so now that we've talked about boarding for Karn targets, how would you board versus aggro?
So versus aggro, like the aggro decks in the format are Gruul and Goblins. There's really not a lot of aggressive stuff going on other than that. There is like a green-white deck that's a Coco deck that's coming around. Aether Gust is great in all of those. So I always board in Aether Gust, and then depending on the matchup, you'll bring in a Negate or a Tail's End, especially against Goblins. You're bringing in Tail's End. I've tried Negate against green-white. I don't really like it that much. I don't even really like the Aether Gust, to be honest. But you just want to slow them down in those matchups using your Aether Spell Bombs, and hopefully you'll have Aether Gust that'll hit. But if not, maybe you'll have a Karn that can go fetch the Spell Bomb that you need, or can go fetch the boat, and you can start killing their creatures.
Okay. And what's your plan versus control?
So versus control, you're bringing in Negate, you're bringing in Tail's End. Sometimes you'll bring in Wilt if you think they're going to bring in a Rest in Peace or a Leyline. You're going to bring in Wilt, but it's not that. I found myself bringing in Wilt less and less often because you have so many other ways to deal with graveyard hate. But just bringing in a Negate, look for a Karn to like get Spyglass, slow their Planeswalkers down. So like typically in those matchups, I'll side out the Mox Amber and I'll side out like a Chromatic Sphere. Side out a land on the draw. You don't want to draw too many lands on the draw. So just those 2 cards.
If you've been playing against blue-white, if you see the Baffling Ends, do you board and Wilt no matter what, or does it just depend on it if you see like the graveyard hate?
Against blue-white, I'm boarding in Wilt, but against like I've been playing a lot of Bant Control.
I have not seen
which
that.
is weird. Yeah, I played it like 3 times today, and just decided like, okay, Wilt is not the card that I want in these matchups.
Sure.
I'm gonna just rely on getting a Karn down and playing permanents that they have problems dealing with, or that they have to tap out to deal with, and try to slow them down as much as I can and just win, without dealing with their graveyard hate.
Cool.
What are the mid-range decks that you're worried about boarding for, and how are you boarding versus those?
I mean, Sultai is the best deck in the format, right? Like, Sultai is just king. So
do we think, by the way, this is a question for the cast. Do you guys classify Sultai as a mid-range deck or a control deck in this format?
Oh, boy. I don't know, Mikaela. What do you think?
I feel like when you're playing Sultai the Mirrors, it's like control. But like an in-between from what I've seen. Is that a fair answer?
It just feels like a control deck that wins with Nissa to me. That's why I asked.
I feel like it's a mid-range deck, and because they're tapping out almost every turn.
Sure.
Like, they play instant speed. They do play some instant speed cards, but they're doing a lot of things on their turn proactively.
Sure.
So that's why I feel like it's mid-range. We also have like Jund and Rakdos. So that's a thing. So against Jund, you're going to bring in your Aether Gust. Against Rakdos, you bring in an Aether Gust as well. But you just smash Jund sack. But Rakdos sack, like, I've had a lot of trouble with Rakdos sack. So
it's a lot. I actually lost. That was my only loss with this deck today. Was actually Rakdos sack, for what it's worth. I don't know if it's like the fact that they get to be aggressive with like Dreadhorde Arcanist, or I'm not sure.
That's almost exactly what it is, because because against the creature decks, you're gonna fetch for a boat, you're gonna kill their lands, you're gonna bounce stuff with Aether Spellbomb, and you're gonna slow them down, turn a corner, win the game. But against Rakdos, if you end up killing their Dreadhorde Arcanist, they're going to ping something down in response, and it's usually going to be like a Kinnan or an Emry, because it's always going to be on 2 power. But if it's higher, it's probably going to kill a Planeswalker.
Well, it honestly feels like I can't play my Kinnan or my Emry when there's a Dreadhorde Arcanist in play. But then it's like, okay, well, then what am I doing?
Oh, wait. We're talking about 2 different cards. I'm talking about Dreadhorde Butcher. You're talking about Arcanist.
I might be talking about the same card, actually. I'm talking about the 1/1 that gets counters.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about the same card.
All right, I'm the one that's saying the wrong name for what it's worth. You're saying the right name, and you're talking about the right card.
I knew where you were at, though. That's all that matters. So yeah, that thing just scales so hard, and they've got Claim the Firstborns a lot more frequently than the junk decks do. It is very annoying.
It's so annoying. You're making me mad. That card beats me more than any other card in Historic these days.
Does it really?
Yeah, I lose to that card a lot.
Well, that's probably because you're playing the deck for the cast, and it just kind of folds. You're like, oh great, I played an Uro, and they're like, yeah, great, I'm gonna take it.
Kind of back to what Mikaela said, though. How are you boarding against those? Like you talked about, kind of, you're saying you're crushing Jund, but you're just boarding in an Aether Gust and praying?
Yeah, I'm just boarding in an Aether Gust. With this deck, I'm always taking out a land on the draw. Every time I'm on the draw, I take out a land. Every time I'm on the play, I'm taking out either a Chromatic Sphere or a Mox Amber. So a lot of times you won't draw that one sideboard card, but when you do, it feels so good. And it's really more about what your plan is against those decks rather than what your sideboard plan is against those decks, because 11 of our cards are wish targets.
So you kind of talked about Sultai a little bit here, and I want to dive in because we talked about how we have the Gust, right, and then we have the Negate. But if your entire plan in a matchup is to basically grab a Spyglass, and they're playing up to 3 pulses now, is there any thought to just having more Negates, like just actually going up to 2 or 3?
That's the struggle that I've been having a lot. Is the Sultai decks 3 weeks ago, I was beating pretty consistently, but now they've adapted. They're playing more Maelstrom Pulse. I've seen more Assassin's Trophies in the last 2 weeks than I have in a while. And this isn't a deck that really wants more mana. So that matchup has been a struggle. So I think that we could probably find some room for Negate, but the hard thing with Negate is just it's good for 1 turn.
Sure. Is there any? You could just not play Gigantha.
You could just not play Gigantha. Exactly. Gigantha, sure, you cast Gigantha 1 out of every 5 matches, but is that worth that sideboard slot? I'm not sure. I'm thinking about cutting Gigantha in the future once Kaldheim comes out, if this is a deck that I'm going to continue to play. But as of right now, Matt Nass is playing Gigantha, so I think it's probably a good card.
Yeah. That's definitely the dude that I would trust when it comes to a deck like this.
Is he a typical combo player? I don't know a lot about him. I just know that people hold him in high regard.
Wait, do you actually not know the answer to this question?
I really don't know the answer to this question.
Oh, he is do you know what the card? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna flub this on the podcast now. There was a combo deck in Modern that you might have heard of that Clan Ironworks. Do you know what that card is?
Oh, KCI, yeah.
Yeah, so he is the master of KCI. And so when you look at this deck, that's probably the comparison that a lot of people would draw. So
okay.
Yeah, he's the guy that I would trust with this deck too.
That makes sense. So I never played KCI. I never played Modern actually, but I follow it a little bit, and I know that KCI got banned shortly after I started playing the game, so it must have been busted.
I actually think he might have invented that deck, but I'm not 100% sure. So, anyway, huge Matt Nash shout out on this this podcast apparently. Let's go back to the deck outside of the sideboard, and what decks do you want to play against?
So the Red-Black Arcanist this time, not Butcher, the Red-Black Arcanist deck is the deck that I've got an absurd win rate against. It's just crazy how little their cards do against you and how easily you can pick them apart. So that deck is a layup. The Jund Sack decks, like I said earlier, that matchup just feels like a slam dunk. I think I've only lost to it once. You've got a look on your face.
I love basketball references, but people hate it when you make sports references on Magic podcasts. I love it. You just made 2 basketball references in like 17 seconds, and I was all for it.
Well, it is basketball season, and my Celtics look really good right now. So
almost as good as my Jazz.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that later.
Keep going.
So Jund Sack, Rakdos Arcanist. I've had a lot of success against the blue-white control decks. I've had a lot of success against Bant control now that that's been a thing today and today only. So those matchups are pretty good. I'm checking the show notes to make sure there's nothing I missed.
You didn't.
I didn't. Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Which decks do you not want to play against?
So I really hate playing against Sultai. Sultai's been really hard. Red Black Sacrifice with, Dreadhorde Butcher, they put a lot of pressure on you. Those 2 matchups are really, really hard. The mirror is actually pretty complicated as well. And so that's not, obviously, that's the one true 5-5 matchup. But if you're inexperienced in the mirror, you're definitely at a disadvantage. And whoever plays Karn first is going to win. So it's a tough mirror to navigate. I had an opponent play a Karn, wish for a Spyglass, and shut down Karn. And then we had to navigate how we were going to win our matchups. We both had Sky Sovereign on the board, couldn't crew it, couldn't wish for anything, and just had to figure out this hodgepodge of a matchup. It was insane.
It still sounds better than a 9 Lives mirror match, which I've watched before. So,
how does that work?
1-person decks.
Okay, 1-person decks, great. For what it's worth, I've only played against 9 Lives once, and I crushed that because you can still win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, in these matchups that you don't want to be playing against the Sultai and Rakdos, what's your plan so that you can still win?
So against Rakdos, I'm trying to get not a Spyglass, a Spell Bomb down and just bounce their creatures to slow them down. I don't want to let them target me with Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Definitely don't want to sacrifice, any of the creatures that I've got out. So Tamiyo is nice there. But you are not the beat down in that matchup. So you've got to slow them down until you can turn a corner and then press an advantage. And then, like we talked about earlier against Sultai, you really just want to get a Spyglass down so that they can't Nissa. And then if you draw your Aether Gust, play it on a valid target. You don't want to play it on an Uro that's not escaping. You don't want to play it on a Nissa that's coming down if you've got Spyglass. But those decks are, like I said, they're really adapting. I've even seen Casualties of War, and that card just kills you. So you slow them down. You look for ways to win with the boat instead of the combo, unless you just have the combo in your hand. If you get the combo in your hand, you go for the combo. But you have to look for your alternate win conditions in those matchups a lot.
Are you going to play this deck moving forward?
Yeah, I think that I am. Like we talked about earlier, I'm trying to hit top 1200 this month. I've still got a pretty good win rate with it. I've changed a couple of cards, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think Standard is going to be the new hotness in a couple of days. So probably move on to Standard for a little bit. But once I come back to Historic, this is going to be a deck that I look at.
Awesome. So during this part of the show, we want to start inviting people to ask questions to our Mythic guests. We'll post something on Twitter. We'll post something in the Discord. And then also we'll prioritize questions from our Patreon. I actually don't think our Patreon has launched yet. Mikaela and I have been super busy. Like, we have not gotten together, and we talked about it like a couple weeks ago, but I just honest with the cast, like, I have done maybe 50 job interviews in the last month. I am exhausted. I did get a new job, and Mikaela's been super busy as well, and we promised that it is going to launch, and, you know, we know that, you know, also, who cares? Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, like, you know, like, if we're a little late launching it. But we didn't get any questions on Twitter and the Discord, but I actually have some questions for you, James, if I could rattle some off.
Go ahead.
What percentage of the time are you grabbing engine and reservoir versus everything else?
I'm grabbing typically Karn Activation 1. I'm grabbing anything else. Karn Activation 2, if I've got an Emry in play, is always engine. It seems like you've always got the mana for engine. And so once you've kind of shored up that you're going to be able to play it that turn, and it's not going to get stripped away by a Duress or a Thoughtseize, go for it.
So when you say grabbing anything else, are you talking like one of the small, like a Strider Harness, or like anything less mana? Like what do you or like a Sky Sovereign? Like what do you mean?
Sometimes a Sky Sovereign. So it's going to depend on what matchup we're talking about, but
because like for example, I've never grabbed a Godpharaoh's Gift.
I've grabbed Godpharaoh's Gift if it's really late in the matchup and you've got good targets in the graveyard. I've grabbed it. I've grabbed it just because I had so much mana in a control matchup that I wanted them to counter it so that I could play something else.
Sure. That's a good. I've got 15 mana. Let me grab Gift. That's good.
Yeah. A lot of times my first Karn activation, because the format is so aggressive right now, is an Aether Spellbomb. So I won't play Karn until I've got 2 other mana open. One of them will be a blue mana. I'll grab a Spellbomb and I'll bounce a creature and, you know, keep it around for another turn.
My next question for you, by the way, falls in line with that, which is what would you pay for Engineered Explosives to be in this format all of a sudden?
Oh, can you tell me what that card does?
Yeah, it costs X, and it's got Sunburst, which means like the different number of colors you put into it equals X, basically.
Okay.
And then it comes into play with those counters, and then when you sacrifice it for I think 1 mana, it destroys everything, all permanents or non-land permanents with converted mana cost of X,
including your own.
Yes.
Okay. How would we? I mean, it'd be a great board wipe if your board was empty, 100% of the time. You know what? I actually. Sorry, I was just struggling to think of how we were going to use this card because I had never heard what it did before. But I actually think that'd be really good, and I will give Watsy all of my Bison dollars that I have.
What's a Bison dollar?
It's a Street Fighter term.
Oh, I see.
Right. Now Magic players know how it is when their non-Magic friends use things like, "Oh, I'll just scoop."
Oh my gosh, dude! I think my wife hates that more than anyone.
Yeah,
although I think she gets most of it by now.
Yeah.
Friggin' Mikaela married to a Magic player. You guys just probably speak in. You guys speak in that lingo all the time. Mikaela, do you have any? Yeah. My favorite meme of the last like couple weeks was you're just saying sus because you don't know how to spell suspicious. Mikaela, do you have any questions for James?
So, are you a combo player for life now?
No, I don't think I'm a combo player for life now. I actually really like tempo. So
I can tell you talked about Aether Spellbomb like way more than I expected.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a good card. Anyway,
it might have been the most mentioned card.
Yeah, it probably is. It's one of the most played cards in the deck. I actually have started playing a third one in the main deck because the format's just that aggressive. But I play Spirits and Pioneer, and I just can't wait to play Paper Magic again and see how good Skyclave Apparition is in that format.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very excited to go back to that. So tempo for life.
Well, I want to say thank you for coming, James. It was a ton of fun today. If people want to find you and see, how good your Skyclave apparitions end up being, where can they do that?
I'm on Twitter. I think my handle is the Pallet Town Hero, or it could be Pallettown_hero. It's something like that.
It's on the screen if you're watching, and it's in the show notes, and it is Pallettown_hero.
Yeah, we got there. We did it, boys.
Can I ask,
so you can find me...
is that red or ash that you're referencing there?
That's me.
Oh, you are the Pallettown Hero.
Yeah.
All right.
That's me. No, we're referencing Ash there. I'm a big fan of the Pokemon anime. So, yeah.
Nice. Can I we'll just derail for just a second. All right, who is Ash's second best Pokemon? Because obviously Greninja's the best.
His second best Pokemon?
Yeah.
I haven't watched anything super recently, but I know that some time ago, Ash got Charizard back off of the Charizard Island, and I just want to know how strong Charizard was. And I'm a Charizard fanboy, so I have to say Charizard.
There you go. Yeah. I think that's an acceptable answer. If you want to, do you have anything you want to plug?
No, nothing that I want to plug. I love interacting with people on Twitter. So when, we talk about, this is my Twitter handle, even though I don't know what it is, I will talk Magic with you. I'll talk sports with you. I'll talk Street Fighter with you. Any of that stuff. Just give me a mention.
Nice. I'll challenge you to Dragon Ball FighterZ later. You can follow the entire CCMG network. That's where this podcast is hosted. And we've got awesome new stuff. Sam Black's Drafting Archetypes podcast. CCMTG just hit 350 episodes. So a lot of awesome stuff going on over there. You can follow the show at Arena Mythic Cast. And you can follow me at Spencer13H. Mikaela, you just did early access today. How did it go?
I did. It was a lot of fun. I woke some trolls in draft. And nice. I played a brew from a viewer. That was a lot of fun.
If people want to catch the VODs of that, where can they do it?
Yeah. I'm Mythic Mikaela on Twitch, and you can also find me on Twitter at Mythic Mikaela.
You can sub, and review the podcast. It means the world to us. James, for real though, this was actually a ton of fun. I loved having you here. I hope that our teams meet in the NBA Finals this year. And
that'd be a dream come true.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate the time, and you guys have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.